Back, folks. Here we are with another season of the Enneagram in a Movie podcast, part of the Awareness to Action Podcast Network. We are growing and expanding, TJ. We're reaching out into all sorts of areas. I'm Mario Sikora. I'm here with my podcasting partner, TJ Dawe. TJ, it's great to see you again.
You too, and hello, listeners.
All
Good to be
right,
back.
so we are kicking off a series on the subtypes. Okay, so the Enneagram in a Movie is going to be a bi-weekly podcast now. So that means every 2 weeks. And we are going to be looking at one subtype each podcast and a movie that we think captures that subtype really well. So we're kicking it off with this one, TJ. So why don't you introduce what the movie is and give us a synopsis of it?
Yeah, we're going to go way out on a limb, and we're going to talk about The Godfather.
The Godfather II.
The Godfather Part 2, and we're starting
Yes.
with Type 8, specifically the Navigating 8. So here is a very quick synopsis of The Godfather Part 2, which the movie is 3.5 hours, so obviously anything that I would say would be a shortened version of it, but this is a particularly truncated synopsis of the story. So The Godfather Part 2 features two parallel storylines. So in one of them, it's the late 1950s, and Michael Corleone, played by Al Pacino, is the head of the Corleone crime family, and he and his family live in a compound in Lake Tahoe, Nevada. He survives an assassination attempt and then works to find out who ordered it and who in his organization betrayed him. The other storyline takes place in the late 1910s, where a younger Vito Corleone, played by Robert De Niro in an Oscar-winning performance, lives in Little Italy, New York with his wife and very young children, and he works his way up from grocery clerk to mobster.
The history of two generations of crime. The drama of absolute power and the men who violate it. The Godfather, Part 2.
What is your name?
Don Vito Corleone and his son Michael. Both had seen the ones they loved most cut down before their eyes. Both had killed as an act of vengeance. Both commanded the most powerful and merciless crime organization in the world.
Is it true that in the year 1950, you devised the murder of the heads of the so-called five families in New York?
It's a complete falsehood.
They would take any measures.
I mean, you've won. You want to wipe everybody out?
I don't feel I have to wipe everybody out, Tom. Just my enemies.
Make any arrangement.
Michael, we're bigger than U.S. Steel.
Order any death. To protect the empire they controlled. The Godfather and his heir. Both were men of ice, and both were targets.
They're still on the property. Please, Michael, please stay inside.
Keep them alive.
We'll try.
Michael! Alive!
The Godfather Part 2 is Sicily in 1921 and Nevada in 1958. It is revolution in Havana and rubouts in New York. It is manipulation.
It would be like trying to kill the president. There's no way we can get to him.
If anything in this life is certain, if history's taught us anything, it says you can kill anyone.
It is murder. And it is betrayal.
It was a son, and I had it killed because this must all end.
The Godfather Part 2 is the final chapter in the violent history of the Corleone crime family. It is the motion picture masterpiece of the year.
So a couple of things. You mentioned that this was a 3.5-hour movie. I had forgotten how long it was. It's been a while since I've seen Godfather II. And I got to tell you something, because the perpetual question is, which one's better, one or two? And, even though The Godfather will always be close to my heart, I'm going to go out on a limb here and say The Godfather 2 is a better movie.
And I'm going to agree with you.
Yeah.
And
why do you think so?
Well, I too hadn't seen it in a long time. And when the running time came up on my screen, it was like 3 hours and 20 minutes. Oh my God. Flew by. Even though it's not a fast-paced movie. There's a lot of just slow, quiet shots. There's a lot of, we'll get into this, a lot of shots of somebody observing. Yeah. And yet it just has that magic that in every shot, in every moment, in every line, I'm there. Even if nothing extraordinary is happening, even if the dialogue is run-of-the-mill in a given scene, it's not like it's flowery or lyrical or anything like that, but it just has that magic. It's got that lightning in a bottle that can't be quantified and that even Coppola himself couldn't recreate in some of his later movies, including The Godfather Part 3.
Yeah. There were a few things that stood out to me. Number one, it felt, I don't know what the comparative budgets on the movies were, but it really seemed like Coppola had kind of carte blanche to, spend more money and make a bigger movie. Not that it seemed like a big movie, okay, in that sense, but it just had this kind of expanded scope that, made it more, epic in that sense. I don't know who won the Best Actor award in 1974, but man, oh man, it must have been some performance to be better than Pacino in Godfather 2, because he was just amazing. I mean, absolutely amazing.
I believe it was Art Carney in Harry and Tonto.
Oh, good Lord. Well,
a movie people are still obsessed with today.
Yeah. Well, in fairness, I did not see that movie. And, Art Carney seemed like a good guy, but wow, was Pacino good in this, right? I mean, just seething with rage and intensity and
never overdoing it.
No, it wasn't Scent of a Woman, right? Which he did win the Oscar for. And he could go from this volcanic explosion to this absolute deadness, right? I mean, there are just scenes where it's like there is just no soul there. It's an empty, hard, cold-hearted person, right? So I just think he was so good in this. I also think that just the basic direction itself, I mean, in the editing, the transitions from, the latter part of the story to the earlier part of the story, they were just breathtaking. I mean, when you sat and you watch those and you think, man, what a great transition that is, right? Thematically, visually. This was an accomplishment, this film.
Absolutely. The cinematography, the production design, you mentioned the budget seemed higher. The scenes that take place in Little Italy were clearly shot on location and not on a soundstage, but it was a very doctored location. It was very decorated with a lot of extras. There's a scene where there's a big celebration, there's a big parade happening, but it's like you really get the sense that you feel like you're there. Even though I have no connection to that community, that culture, obviously it's long before my time. It's just so immersive and beautiful to watch.
Yeah. So, clear to say we're big fans of the movie, which makes it easier to talk about. And there are two, I think we're in agreement that there are two significant type 8 characters in this. Both of the protagonists in the two parts of the movies, Robert De Niro as Vito Corleone playing, one type 8, and Pacino playing another type 8. We think they're different subtypes, though. Talk about that, TJ.
Yeah, well, as you said, there's a lot of 8 in this movie. And there's a previous episode, if anybody cares to listen to it and isn't familiar with it, on the Enneagram and a Movie podcast on The Godfather. And I have taken your course with Awareness to Action, where you used a scene from that as a way to teach the difference between transmitting, navigating, and preserving 8, citing Michael Sonny and Vito as the examples of those things.
Right.
So my answer is very much informed by the fact that the correct answer was given to me already. But Vito is a great example of a navigating 8. And you see that in abundance in both The Godfather with Marlon Brando's performance and in Godfather Part 2 with Robert De Niro's performance. And Michael is very much the preserving 8 in both movies.
Yeah, so I think, the structure we decided on for these podcasts is to, have some brief conversation about the movie like we're doing now, and then talk about what is 8-ish about the movie and or specific characters, what is navigating about, a specific character, and then what is navigating 8 about the movie or the character. And then, we'll share some other thoughts as well. But let's start off with what is 8-ish about Godfather II. What are your thoughts on that, TJ?
Yeah, so type 8, in short, the strategy involved, to use the awareness to action language, and I see no reason not to, is it's a strategy of strive and feel powerful. And mafia culture in general, and my knowledge of mafia culture comes exclusively from movies and TV shows, but mafia culture in general is very much about power. It's about asserting power, maintaining power, shoring up, or expanding power. There's very much a law of the jungle mentality of it's kill or be killed. It's don't show weakness, show strength. And also there's a fair bit of objectifying people because mobsters in the movies will murder rivals and you never see them feel any qualms about doing so. You never see them racked by guilt or by PTSD or anything like that. If anything, they will murder someone and then immediately, and we see this a number of times in Godfather Part 2, be very kind to their children.
Yes.
As if they've just come home from seeing a movie or something like that.
Right. Or go to church or something like that, right?
But they're calm, they're not sweaty, they're not flooded with adrenaline. This is the price of doing business because I am a tough mobster. And there's no chest beating with that. It's just like it's this, what I've come to observe, and we've talked about this in the podcast before, but this quiet resting power that you often see with 8s. And some characters or people in life can be mistakenly typed as 8s because they're really loud about it and they're trying to convince everybody they're powerful, whereas actual 8s tend to relax into their power and simply exude it even when they're not trying to. And you see that a lot in this movie.
Yeah. I think the understanding the 3 subtypes is important in understanding this, right? Because particularly with the preserving 8 and the navigating 8, it is more of that relaxing into the power. Whereas with the transmitting 8, like Sonny Corleone, for example, who makes a brief cameo in Godfather II, it is this more sort of expressive and stereotypical 8.
Right.
So there is a difference, but I think a lot of people would argue that Michael Corleone is not an 8 in The Godfather. I think they're completely wrong because, this, it is a pure 8 character, but it's a preserving 8, so it's not that stereotype like you're saying.
So what do you think he might be mistaken for?
I've heard people say he's a 5,
right.
Which,
and there's a connection between the 2 types.
Yes, there's a huge amount of detachment, okay, and we'll talk about that connecting point as we go. But this guy is all about power, right? He is not all about detachment. He is all about power and vengeance. This whole movie is about vengeance from the very beginning until the very end. The theme is vengeance, and that is the traditional fixation of type 8. And it's not only about vengeance, but it's about the soul-crushing and deadening impact of a life lived for vengeance, because that's what we see in Michael. And that's the beauty of that little coda at the end where they flash back to, Sonny at the table and all that, where he is this idealistic person who dropped out of college to join the Marines so he could go fight the Japanese and stick up for his country. And then he just falls from that person who doesn't want to be in the family business to this isolated, alone person who not only, fell into the family business, but expanded it and became far more ruthless than his father ever was.
And far more successful and far more wealthy. And the victory is completely empty. It's one of my favorite endings of a movie ever, because he accomplishes everything he wants to, and then he's just left basically sitting on an empty throne.
Yes.
A lot like Macbeth in the movie Macbeth, or in the play. But basically his wife has left him.
But the movie was so much better, TJ, wasn't it?
Agreed.
Good. Yeah.
But it's eights have, as you said, this fixation of revenge or vengeance, and striving to feel powerful is something that they're always going for. And as you talk about, the awareness action method is helping people find a more adaptive interpretation of what it means to feel powerful. And if I feel powerful by vanquishing all my enemies, by destroying all my enemies, even if I succeed, like Michael does in this movie, what am I left with? This dead soul, no love, a wife who's left me. And in his case, he's Catholic, so there's no allowance for divorce and remarriage.
Right.
He's murdered his own brother. Yeah. He's miserable. Yeah.
There's a great line where, he's confronting Tom toward the end, Tom Hagen, played by Robert Duvall, and he finds out that Tom had been offered a job by one of the casinos. And, when I had seen that scene before, the menace underlying that conversation didn't really strike me the way it had this time, because Michael is basically quizzing him, how come you're not telling me this? He's testing his loyalty. And you just know that if Tom does not pass this loyalty test, he's making a fishing trip with Fredo, right? So, it's not going to go well for him. And you can feel not only Tom's fear, but his heartbreak, right? At, being questioned and, realizing that, nobody's safe with this guy. Right. It just, to me, this just exuded all the kind of more negative things about 8 in the Michael character. Now, again, he's a preserving 8, and this episode is about navigating 8. And so even though there's a huge amount of navigating in the Michael storyline, we see it coming at a cost, right? I mean, he's exhausted after every navigating experience, and that's consistent with the zone of inner conflict for preservers being the navigating domain, right? I can do it, but it comes at a cost. I can do it, but I want to stop doing it as soon as I can. And we see this throughout with Michael. Okay? But we're really, when it comes to the navigating 8, we really want to talk about Vito. Okay, so let me ask you this, TJ. In what way did you see Vito as 8-ish?
Well, again, that very quiet power. The movie starts with, and just to get back to revenge for a second, it starts with a scene when Vito is a young child, and his father's been killed because of an insult to a local mafia chieftain in Sicily. And his mother pleads for his life, and the mafia guy refuses, saying, he'll grow up and he'll come back and kill me. That's exactly what Vito does. Yeah. He escapes as a child.
He was right to be afraid.
Yeah, it was precisely right. So that Mafia Don was probably an 8 himself, with a very correct understanding of vengeance among 8s and among people in general. And Vito leaves, comes to America as a little kid, makes his way, speaking no English whatsoever, works his way up from nothing, marries, has kids, starts working as a grocery clerk, works his way up into becoming powerful. And what does he do with that power? Exact revenge on someone who wronged him as a child, because that cannot stand. And that is very much an 8 thing. It's like, you will not get one over on me.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what vengeance is all about, right? So vengeance, we always think of, we tend to think of as something dramatic, like him going back to Sicily and stabbing the guy that killed his father. That's vengeance. But vengeance can be smaller, too. It can be, if somebody makes a joke at your expense, you have to get them back, right? So any kind of slight has to be met and one-upped to reestablish that position of power. So 8s are kind of seeking vengeance all the time, even in their little, regular day interactions very often. And kind of part of their growth is just to let things slide. Okay. Before he passed away, Claudio Naranjo, I saw him in a video where he was saying that he didn't think that vengeance was really the fixation of 8 after all. And I forget what he, kind of changed it to. But boy, I think he made a mistake on that one because, I just, look, as an 8, I get that. And it really is, that is the fixation. That's where the mind goes all the time.
And it should be said, in case it's not obvious, most 8s do not commit murder.
Yeah.
The vast majority of 8s aren't criminals.
Yeah. Yes, we should make that note clearly. Yes, well, not all 8s are killers,
and not all Italians are the mafia.
There you go. All right. So let's see. Anything else strike you as 8-ish about Vito before we get into the navigating piece?
Yeah. Well, on the other end of the spectrum, huge tenderness. He's got 3 kids, which in that portion of the movie, they're all in infancy or toddlerhood, and he's incredibly gentle with them. And you see him holding the baby Michael in his arms and telling him in Italian that your father loves you very much. Or after murdering the Sicilian mobster, he's there on a trip with his whole family. We cut immediately to him leaving on the train, holding Michael in his arms and waving his hand, saying goodbye. But he's just this gentle, loving father.
Yeah.
And that's another side of the 8 that's not... 8s tend not to lead with that. And stereotypical portraits of 8s might leave that out. And you might need to be close to an 8 to know that side of them. But any 8 that I've worked with, like in an Enneagram workshop, if they feel comfortable to do so, will cop to that of like, there is that part of me. Absolutely.
Yeah. Just on a personal note there, my wife and I were out to dinner with some friends recently. And one of them says, boy, it must be tough being your child, and because he sees me as very 8-ish. And my wife said, "Are you kidding? He's a marshmallow." And I am. I am a softie with my kids. Now, don't get me wrong. They, I can be a marshmallow because they're good kids, and they know. That there are consequences for stepping out of line, even though I have never had to enforce any real consequences, right? There's just something about 8s, and I think I bring this as a parent of, when I say get out of my chair, they get out of my chair, right? It's just, they know that's my seat, and, I sit there and, kind of thing. But, I don't have to threaten them or anything like that. So anyway, 8s combine this kind of strength with this softness that you're talking about. So,
and the virtue of type 8 is innocence, and that is an aspect of that.
Yeah. So let's talk about navigating. So the navigating domain, so a lot of people refer to it as, the social instinct. I've got some problems with that because it's not necessarily about being social or sociable or extroverted. It is about wanting to understand group dynamics, how they work, and where I fit into the group. Okay, how do I navigate this social domain? And again, I think that is very much on display throughout this movie, especially the parts with Vito. Thoughts on that?
Yeah, Vito comes as a newcomer to America, and the audience is a newcomer to the world of Little Italy circa 1917. So something that I've theorized is that any period piece has navigating inherently in it, because we are looking at this world that we do not belong to, and we're being introduced to the mores of that world, which is very much a navigating thing of like, what are the codes? What are the unwritten rules? Right. How do people interact in this world? In this case of Catholic, Italian-speaking Italian immigrants in New York at this time. And there's things like cultural festivals. So we see these big floats where people have pinned money onto it. Or we see there's a local criminal called Don Fanucci, and people pay tribute to him, and that's how that works, and so on and so forth. So there's that element of it, which is very navigating. Navigating in this also one of the subdomains, as you teach it, is trust and reciprocity. boy, is there a lot of that in this movie. And that is very much how Vito operates and how he makes the climb from grocery clerk to mobster to local guy like Don, which is to establish relationships, which is not necessarily a relationship of intimidation of like, I'm the toughest guy, and if you don't bow down to me, I will kick your ass, I will hurt your family. It's more like, we know each other. We like each other. I'm grateful for this thing that you did for me. If you ever need a favor, come call on me.
Yeah.
So if that person's paying him tribute, he always relates to that person like an equal, and he's courteous and he's grateful to them and makes sure that they know I'm here for you if you need me. And we see that in the first Godfather, and we see that abundantly in this. There's just this understanding of like, we have a relationship. There's give and take in this, even though I'm the powerful guy.
Right. And when he, in the beginning of the story of him, so I'll tell you what, let me sort of back this up a little bit here, right? So when it comes to the navigating domain, one of the things that really struck me was when he goes with Tessio to the play to see the girl that Tessio has the crush on and wants to take out to dinner and all that stuff. And they see Don Fanucci threatening her and her father, or whoever, owned the theater. Tessio wants to leave, right? He wants to get out of there. And Vito is trying to understand, right? He's kind of watching. He's paying. He's trying to figure out what is happening here, what's going on, right? So it's that desire to understand what is happening around one that really captures the navigating domain. No, wait. I don't want to leave yet. I want to understand this, right? So it kind of starts there. And then we see it when, he develops this relationship with Clemenza, played by Bruno Kirby, and Tessio, and they're doing these burglaries together, and they have to pay tribute to Don Fanucci. And even though Vito, Clemenza up to that point was the ringleader, right? He was the guy in charge, probably a transmitting type 8, Clemenza, and then to your point about trust and reciprocity, Vito says, you know what? I have an idea. Let me work this out. I'm going to make an arrangement with Fanucci. I'm going to do this. And then, from here on out, I'll take a piece of the business, right? So it's this very smooth takeover, right? And this is something we see in 8s in general, and particularly navigating 8s. They're happy to let somebody else be in charge until they spot a weakness, right? And then it's, okay, now I need to move in. I've been wanting to move in all along, but I haven't been letting on that I really want to. I've been playing along that I can let you be in charge, but I'm just waiting for that moment. And this is the moment where Vito goes from number 2 to number 1.
With no resentment from Clemenza. You never get a sense in this movie or in The Godfather that Clemenza's like, you upstart, I was here before you, why aren't I in charge? It's more like, I'm in good hands with this guy. Yes,
exactly.
Happy to be a part of this. Good decision.
Yeah, exactly right. Where we really see this navigating equality that you're talking about, of this kind of subtle influence rather than dominance, is with the landlord and his wife's friend, who's being kicked out of her apartment because they hit a puppy there, and so the landlord's going to get rid of them. And so the wife goes to him and says, oh, can you help the friend out? And he doesn't go and threaten the landlord. He doesn't go to him and say, hey, change your mind or I'm going to break your legs. There's none of that. He sees him on the street.
Sonny would probably do if he'd been in that situation. A transmitter's a transmitting 8's approach would be kick his ass hard, fast.
Hit him with a trash can lid, all that stuff.
Totally.
Yeah. But no, he walks up to him and he says, hey, let me talk to you. Introduce yourself, where you're from. Hey, we're from the same, almost neighbors, kind of thing. And the guy's like, get out of here. Who are you? And he says to him, look, ask around the neighborhood about me.
This is after he offers to pay the increase in rent too.
Yes,
he's generous.
Yes,
and he doesn't.
Yes,
it doesn't even imply that he's a criminal or has any power. It's just how much you're raising the rent. Here's 6 months raised rent in advance.
Right.
And by the way, she keeps the puppy. What? Who the hell are you? Get out of my face.
Right. But then the landlord comes back, right? Because the landlord did do what he suggested, which is go ask around the neighborhood. And he finds out that, wait a minute, this is not a guy you want to be messing with, right? And so he shows up at the office of the olive oil company and just falling all over himself to apologize. And again, Vito doesn't throw it in his face. Vito doesn't, humiliate the guy or threaten the guy or try to scare him or anything like that. He offers him a cup of coffee. He says, he's very gentle to him. And he also kind of strong arms him a little bit, right? By upping the deal. The guy says, "Oh, I'll reduce the rent, $5." And he looks at him, he goes, "Eh." And he looks over at Tessio, and, he just looks at Tessio, and you can see the landlord starting to panic, right? And he says, no, 10, I'll reduce it $10, kind of thing. And so again, it's this calm. I have set the stage here to establish a reputation, okay? And to not have to pound my chest, but just let it be known and then let things unfold from there.
He says hardly a word in that scene. And that is such a brilliant example of that resting power of I don't have to look at you threatening, much less say a threatening word or flex my muscles or subtly imply a threat of just give a glimmer of there's a gun in my coat pocket. Nothing like that. I just have to sit here holding space, exuding power for the landlord to say, I'll reduce the rent. I'll reduce it even more. No, thank you for the offer of a cup of coffee, but I got to go.
Yeah. And I think a point I want to make on this is that that didn't happen just because he was a badass. There was kind of this strategic reputation management and this strategic establishing of the identity that was just part of what Vito does, right? What Vito did. It was, I am figuring out how to let people know that I'm not someone to be trifled with without having to make a big deal about it, right? So it's very, very strategic. And this is the thing we see about Vito, and not only in this movie, but Godfather I, I think it's even more in display, right? Where it's all about how, he's strategically thinking through things. He's not just all about action like Sonny is. He's figuring out the relationship dynamics. He's figuring out the long-term consequences of his actions. He's thinking about, who do I have to talk to? How do I have to influence? Who do I have to manipulate here to get things done? While still being willing to say, hey, I'm going to make you an offer you can't refuse when it comes right down to it.
To expand on something you mentioned before, there's a lot of noticing in this movie, which is very much a navigating thing, of watching, of taking things in. This is a movie entirely without voiceover. So there's never any direct, actor letting us know what Vito is realizing in that moment. We're all seeing it through De Niro's performance. And I can see why some people might mistake this character for a 5 as well, in terms of he does a lot more observing than he does action. And he's very quiet, he's very withdrawn. But I think the difference is an 8, particularly a navigating 8, when they're doing all of that observing, there's strategy happening. It's everything, you can see this in the movie, everything that's coming in is being processed in this brain in terms of, how does this relate to my power? What are the power dynamics here? Where do I fit in? What's the weakness here? How can I leverage that? How can I gain power? That kind of thing.
Yeah. And when it comes right down to it, he's going to shoot you in the face if he has to, right? Like he does with Finucci.
With no hesitation.
So, exactly right. And I'm going to leave here. And to your earlier point, I'm going to walk to where my family is, and they're going to be sitting on the stoop, and I'm going to be loving to my kids and my wife like that never happened, like I didn't just shoot somebody in the face.
And calmly take apart the gun that I used and put it in 5 different chimneys. So he's, again, not in a state of like, I just killed a guy. Blah, blah. It's more like smart, deliberate, cold.
Yeah. All right. There was some other interesting examples of navigating in this movie I wanted to point out. And one of the ones that really struck me, and this is something I don't think I had noticed before upon watching this movie, but the scene where Michael is testifying to the Senate and they're asking him, was your father the Godfather? Did you kill this person? Did you do this? Did you do that? Sitting behind him, almost out of focus, was his wife, Kay, played by Diane Keaton. And I was watching it this time, and I noticed her face throughout that scene and how she was realizing that I have been fooling myself. All of my worst fears are true. I have been pretending that this guy is not a killer and an animal. And now I am realizing that, it's all true. And oh my gosh, what am I going to do? And it's the next scene where she tells him, we're leaving.
Right.
We're not coming back with you, that sort of thing. But I don't know if you noticed that or not, but her face as you watch that scene, it's just a great piece of acting and a great piece of that navigating stuff of, this is what's happening here, right? I'm not just looking at him and thinking of protecting himself. I'm not just thinking of, my own safety and security. I'm realizing what's really going on that I haven't seen all along.
And again, it's done in silence. And as you said, it's not the main part of the frame. She's not the person with lines in that scene. We don't need voiceover. It just happens. The audience is trusted to pick it up or not, but it's there.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So I'm trying to think of what other navigating 8 things happened with De Niro. Go ahead.
I got a couple of just navigating things in general that aren't specific to him. One is code switching. So there's a lot of characters in the movie who, in both storylines, were either born in Italy or America, but they all speak fluent Italian. Not all mobsters are Italian, and one of the major characters in Godfather Part 2 is a Jewish mobster, Hyman Roth, played by the great acting teacher, what's his name?
Lee Strasberg,
who I don't think I've seen in any other movie, and a mentor to both Brando and Pacino. Anyway, there are a number of scenes where the characters speak in fluent Italian to each other. And sometimes they'll throw in an English word or suddenly switch to English or back. But the whole phenomenon of code switching seems very navigating to me. And I say this as somebody who only speaks the English language, of just my understanding of what it's like for people who are multilingual, people who are immigrants, is there are certain instances where you want to speak your regular language because you know exactly who you're speaking to, and it implies a relationship. It implies an understanding.
Yeah. It's there's something tribal to it, right? And this is what the navigating domain's all about, is how do I maintain being part of my tribe and establish what tribe I am part of and that sort of thing. There's also something about organizational structures in the navigating domain, right? Understanding those. And there's the scene where Chi-Chi is testifying to the Senate, and they're talking about, did you ever interact with this? Did you ever get an order from so-and-so? And he said, no, I don't, I don't deal with them directly, and, oh, are you saying there's buffers between you guys? Yeah, that's it. There's a lot of buffers in the family, kind of thing, right? And again, that's a navigating thing of understanding the buffers. And Chi-Chi clearly, it wasn't really tuned into that. He knew it was a reality. He was probably kind of a transmitter himself, but but still there was this, the mob is set up in a navigating structure, right? It has this, very clear structure to it that is carried on. Oh. And there was that great scene where Tom and Frankie are having the conversation right before Frankie kills himself, talking about how it's based on Roman legions and all of that.
Well, along those lines, another big navigating thing is reading between the lines.
Yeah.
So Tom visits Frankie Pantangeli, who's in, he's living on an army base, and he's just reneged on his testimony, so he's facing who knows what consequences. And Tom Hagen is frisked when they get in to make sure he doesn't have a weapon. He doesn't. And he has a conversation in which, on the surface, it's simply about Roman history.
Right.
But the subtext of it is very clear, which is, if you want to protect your family, here's the one thing you can do. Kill yourself, die honorably, and that's it. And it's abundantly clear to Frankie. It's abundantly clear to the audience. And at the end, one of the moments that I just love is Tom claps him on the shoulder and says, "Don't worry about anything, Frankie, 5 angels." which is the direct translation of his last name. But the use of a nickname in that moment very strongly implies we understand each other. Yeah. We have a bond way beyond anything this law enforcement container could understand.
Yeah, that's a good insight. A couple of other navigating things that I saw. So you mentioned Lee Strasberg as Hyman Roth. Again, a very interesting character. First of all, I mean, kind of like a big, puppet string puller, behind the scenes here, right? Very strategic in his duplicity and manipulations of people all around. And there was also this very kind of simple quality to Hyman Roth, right? Now here's this guy who's probably worth hundreds of millions of dollars in 1950s money, which is a whole lot of money, and yet living in a pretty nondescript house, sitting in this, kind of simple room, watching the baseball game and eating a tuna sandwich on a TV tray, just, so again, felt like a very kind of navigating character to me. The money's not the point, right? The money is important, but it's a way of keeping score. It's the game, right. But it's not the stuff that it buys that are of interest to me. And I think you see the same thing with Vito and throughout. It's like, the money's part of it, but it's the game that counts.
Right. You see Vito in The Godfather at one point. Well, that's when the assassination attempt happens on him, is he's buying fruit from a vendor. Yeah. He's not above doing that.
Right.
He's like, I wouldn't mind getting some oranges right now. All right, let's go get them.
Yeah. And there's the nice, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, that's it.
There's the nice throwback scene to that where De Niro's Vito is going to buy the fruit from the vendor on the street, and the vendor won't take his money. And says to him, no, and Vito's kind of surprised at this because probably, and it's, again, he's just becoming the guy, right? So this is probably the first time he hasn't had to pay for the fruit. And for him, he's got the money, right? He's dressed well, all that sort of stuff. He's got his own business, but it's just, okay, that's the status of this, right? That's how this works, I look out for them. They give me some free fruit. It's just it's a tribute. Right. So again, it's a navigating thing. It's not like, I need to save some money on fruit. How can I figure out how to chisel this guy out of 25 cents for a few oranges or something? No, it's all about the relationship and what it says about the individual.
And you're right. It's very possible that that's the moment that it occurs to him. Okay, my reputation precedes me.
Yeah.
Noted.
Yeah. Right.
I don't have to tell anybody who I am anymore.
Right. I also think that the senator was probably a navigating three. And I'm forgetting the senator's name, but
Geary.
Geary, yeah, thank you. And I was going back and forth between navigating and transmitting with him, but I think that just the way he could turn on a dime. He's being one way to Michael in the beginning, right? I mean, he's pretty confrontational to Michael. He's not very smart. And, tells Michael, I don't want to be in the room with you greaseballs any longer than I have to, something to that effect. But then he walks out and immediately starts becoming the politician, right? Of, oh, ladies, it's so nice to see you, sort of thing. So there's this kind of, I don't know. You talked about code switching earlier, right? But it's that, and it's almost kind of like this chameleon-like malleability that navigators can have, right? And that's one of the things that frustrates other people about navigators, because they're not sure. Are you the guy in the room with Michael, or are you the guy in the other room with the wives? I mean, who is this person? So I think that he might have been, and the way he acted at the Senate hearing as well, right? He gets up and he gives that speech about how great the Italian American people are, and
it's a big round of applause,
right? And the other senators are sitting there scratching their heads like, oh, good Lord, what is this all about, right? And then he leaves out. So I think I would probably put him into the kind of the navigating three category.
Another bit of navigating that struck me in this movie is the theme of isolation and exile. So that's the future that Frankie Pentangeli finds himself in. You know, like if he testifies against Michael, you know, they say, you know, you can live on this Air Force base forever. You can live in witness protection. And they don't realize what they're really saying to him is you can live with no one for the rest of your life. You will be physically safe. Your needs will be provided for, but you will have no connections. You will have no status, nothing.
Yeah.
And that's also what happens to Fredo. So when Michael discovers that Fredo was the person in his family who betrayed him, who facilitated the assassination attempt engineered by Hyman Roth, he casts him out and says, I don't want to see you. I don't want to know you. I don't consider you my brother. And if you ever come to visit our mother, I want to know a day in advance so I won't run into you. And then refuses to be in the same room with him at the funeral.
Yeah.
So it's very much like a navigating nightmare is to be exiled, to be cut off completely.
Yeah. And also that whole relationship speaks to the eightness of Michael, right? It's that because you keep thinking at some point he's got to forgive him, right? You know, it's his brother, you know. I mean, I know he tried to have you killed, you know, in your bedroom and stuff. I mean, he didn't really, but you know, I know he did something that might seem unforgivable, but you keep thinking, okay, he's going to change his mind. He's going to say, okay, bygones, it's been 20 years, you know, whatever it is. And he even kind of pretends to do that at the funeral. But even as he's pretending to, you know, to forgive him, he's looking at Al Neri, and you can just tell, man, this is a death sentence, right? I mean, you know, and again, it's that deadness in his face that, you know, we talked about. This character really, really demonstrates the type 8 connection to the connecting points, right? Point 2, striving to feel connected. Point 5, striving to feel detached. It's really vivid how it displays striving to feel detached, because Michael is just cold as black coal. And, you know, so, and it's to help him feel more powerful, right? And this is what happens. This is why 8s, you know, use that strategy, because detaching makes me feel more powerful. And they have a complicated relationship with the connecting point at point 2, striving to feel connected. Part of them wants to connect, but it also feels like a vulnerability, right? If I connect to you people, even when Vito, you know, his wife is coming to him about the neighbor and her apartment situation, there's a part of him that's like, yeah, you know, I don't want to deal with this. I don't want to have to, you know, I don't want to have to take this on, because once I get involved, I'm really involved.
He offers to pay for her moving.
Yes.
It's like,
yes.
That would be a simple solution.
Exactly, right? Don't get me emotionally involved in this thing that I don't want to be emotionally involved in. And this is the challenge that 8s have, right? Because once they make that investment of, okay, I'll get involved, they're all the way in, right? I can't just get involved and then step out. And, you know, that's it. So it's a big ask to get 8s involved in something, because they feel it's a big responsibility. They will go to the ends of the earth for you. But you know what? You better be there when I need you.
And what's unspoken in that is, if I let you close to me, you can really hurt me, yes. Which is exactly what happens with Fredo. And when he confronts him in Cuba, he says to him, I know it was you. You broke my heart.
Yes.
And he means it. And I think that's what's behind that continued black animosity that he feels.
Yes.
So much later, is like, I let you, it was never a matter of like, you know, I never trusted you. I always thought you were a shitty brother. Right. I never thought you were smart. I never thought you were tough. It's like, how could you do this to me?
Yes.
I can't abide this. I cannot forgive you.
And that is the cardinal sin for an 8, is for somebody that they have placed their trust in to betray them. Right? That is the unforgivable sin. It is the thing they don't get over. It's the thing that they will go to their grave seeking vengeance for. And again, Michael's a great example of that. Yeah. All right. So what else about this haven't we discussed either? 8ishness, navigating, or navigating 8.
Pecking order is a big thing in this movie. So mafia is very hierarchical in terms of who is at what position on the ladder. And, just referencing Fredo again, in a conversation after the fact with Michael, he reveals just how much he resents as the older brother being under the command of his kid brother, as he calls him.
Yeah.
Like, I was stepped over. I can handle things. I'm smart. I want respect.
Yeah.
So that really stings for him. He's not an 8, but like he's aware of the pecking order, and that he believes that there's a righteousness to it being in terms of age, and how humiliated he feels by his younger brother being in charge.
Yeah. I think watching that scene, I think really for the first time, I felt such huge empathy and sympathy for Fredo, right? Fredo's always been kind of the joke of the Godfather, right? Nobody wants to be Fredo. But I think in that moment, there was just such a humanity to him and such a heartbreak. And again, that speaks to the amazing John Cazale and his, acting ability. But, this time as I was watching that, I thought, oh man, my heart's breaking for Fredo. Imagine being him, but didn't bother Michael. Right. Right. It didn't have any impact on him.
Exactly. Let's close off my heart to this person. You are dead to me before you're literally dead because of me. Yeah. Another pecking order thing is just the honorific Don. It's very important in the Godfather movies. Who is the Don? Don Fanucci or Don Corleone, that kind of thing. The literal translation is basically the equivalent of Sir or Lord.
Yeah.
And Mozart has a famous opera, Don Giovanni, that kind of thing. It implies royalty. It implies aristocracy, even though unlike actual royalty and aristocracy, this isn't something you necessarily inherit. It can be something that you can, like Vito, you can come up from peasanthood and become the Don. But once people start referring to you as that means something.
Yeah, and there can be a manipulative quality to it, because I think that Vito refers to the landlord as Don Ricardo at the first time they talk, right? So it's kind of this, tactic of, kind of sneaking in here, right? Showing this respect for you, even though I know, how this is really going to go. So.
Also, when Michael goes to Cuba, he names Tom Hagen as the Don in his absence. And that is a big deal. And Tom is very aware of what a big deal that is. Even though it's just said in private. It's not like there's some big ceremony where he declares this to a gathering of mobsters. He doesn't have to. Word will spread that Tom Hagen's the Don. Listen to him absolutely on all things.
Yeah, good.
Okay. How might this story have played out differently with a transmitting or preserving 8?
Yeah, that's interesting. So if we and I think we can look at either one of the two stories within this movie. So I'll tell you what, let me talk about, I'll talk about Vito, and then let's hear from you on Michael on this, right? So I can't imagine Vito having been as successful as he was and building the empire like he did if he was a transmitting character. One of my favorite management theorists is a guy named David McClelland. And he talked about the importance of power motivation in leaders. And he drew the distinction between a personal power leader and an institutional power leader. And the personal power leader, when you read the descriptions in McClelland's work, kind of reads like a transmitting 8, a not very healthy transmitting 8, who it's about them, right? So it's Don Fanucci. Okay, it's people like that who are, no, hey, this all rolls up to me, and so forth. And those people almost always have a tragic end. Either they bring too much attention to themselves and they end up going to jail, or they surround themselves with yes people who, who degrade the quality of the talent in the organization, right? So they're, they only want people who are going to do what they want them to do and, not speak back with truth to power, all these sort of things. So the group ends up crumbling from the inside or crumbling from the outside because of the pressure, brought on by the attention. So I think that Vito was able to build what he did because he established relationships and he thought in the long term. Okay? I think Michael trying to build something, what happens with preservers and preserving eights is that they're less risk-taking in some ways. Even though Michael was trying to build something, you typically don't see preservers building big empires in a way, right? Because they want to build something safe and consistent and then hold on to it. So I don't think that it would have been nearly as expansive a story with a preserving eight in, as that character. So for me, it worked better from that perspective.
Well, you mentioned that Clemenza's probably a transmitting eight. So he's in that same environment, and it's a vivid illustration of the fact that he seemed perfectly fine just doing small-time crime.
Mm.
Like he wore his jaunty hat, he got what he needed, but that was enough for him. Like as you're saying, he was thinking short-term. He wasn't thinking long-term. Right. And then in The Godfather, Sonny famously is a transmitting eight, and that is used to manipulate him. He's very prone to flying off the handle and ends up literally being killed because his enemies know this about him and leverage it against him. So I can imagine if Vito had been a transmitting eight, he similarly could have been manipulated in that environment in the same way. Or he might have, he usurps Don Finucci and murders him, but he does it with no witnesses. A transmitter might have done it in public. Of like, hey, everybody, watch, there's a new king in town. Right.
Yeah, there's that great scene in American Gangster with Denzel Washington and Russell Crowe. And there's the scene where Denzel, playing a transmitting eight character, goes up to Idris Elba's character right on the street in Harlem and shoots him right in the head. Right out there, and then he goes back into the diner and he finishes his breakfast. Okay, but it's this, it's this sending of a message, okay, in the way that you're talking about that a transmitter might do it.
Totally, like I want people to know my name, very much like how Don Finucci wears this really eye-catching white suit and hat. It's like he's peacocking. So when he walks through the neighborhood amongst poor working class Italians whose clothes are pretty drab, boy, does he pop. You can see him from blocks away. So when he's walking through the parade, people see from a distance, there's the big guy.
Yes.
There's the man. Everybody notice how much money he's putting on that float.
Yeah. I'll go back to American Gangster, and there's the reason that his whole world falls apart, Frank Lucas's, played by Denzel Washington, is because his wife gets him this fur coat and hat that he wears to the first Ali Frazier fight at the Madison Square Garden. And because he has a really good ticket and because the police are watching everybody there, they say, wait a minute, who's this guy? And they only noticed him because of the flamboyance of what he was doing, and so that was the start of his downfall. Now he recognized it, and he had always kind of tried to get people not to be so flashy. But again, it illustrates the point that, the peacock, the feathers look good, but the fox can see them too, right? So there's a downside to that.
Yeah, transmitters can be brought down by transmitting.
Yeah. All right. Very good. So other thoughts on this before we wrap up?
How would the Michael portion have been different if he had been a navigating eight?
Yeah. What are your thoughts?
I think he might have been more strategic about, do I really want to get in bed with Hyman Roth? Because what he uncovers is that Hyman Roth was the person who, on the surface, was his ally and was naming him as his successor and was going to be a big help to him, but actually was secretly plotting against him the whole time. There's a scene in The Godfather when Vito turns down the offer from Sollozzo to get into bed with him and one of the other families. And he politely and respectfully says, why? I'm not going to do that. Everything like that. I can imagine Vito having a similar conversation with Hyman Roth. Because at one point, I think it's Frank Pentangeli says to him, your father worked with Hyman Roth, but he never trusted him. Yeah. So that's a big theme, is who can I trust? Yeah. And Michael is a preserver. He's not oblivious to navigating the way Sonny was, the way a transmitter might be, but he's just clearly not good enough at it to spot from the get-go, This guy's not to be trusted.
Yeah. And he also didn't build relationships and loyalty in the same way that his father did. I don't know. People followed Michael out of fear, not out of affection, okay, or out of self-interest, not out of affection. And I think that's, where a preserver can struggle. Again, this is not to say that preservers aren't loved by, their family and that they don't build good relationships. But on a massive scale like that, they're going to struggle with it more than a navigator might in that same situation of just being able to kind of keep those contact points with people such that they don't feel necessarily transactional, and therefore build the kind of loyalty and trust that is so much part of navigating.
And I think there's no better illustration of that than Michael's leveraging Senator Geary by initially having a meeting with him that's polite but not friendly.
Right.
And then eventually manipulating things behind the scenes to set up Geary to believe that he had murdered a sex worker.
Right.
And then, again, this is one of those, I don't need to say the actual words. Tom Hagen says, the only thing left is our friendship. Right. What's implied is, you belong to me now.
Yeah, right.
If you want to have a career, if you want to stay out of prison, you will serve Michael unconditionally. Yeah. So that's not out of love. That is very much out of fear and self-interest.
Right, right. Even Tom was afraid of him at the end, right? And you can't imagine Tom being afraid of Vito.
Right.
He just, it would be really, really hard to get to that point. Certainly not for something that he hadn't done. All right, good.
So who are some other navigating eights we can recommend?
So navigating eights are pretty common in, kind of action movies, hero movies, that sort of thing. So you see them a lot. I think that, one of the great ones that I think we've probably talked about this before at some point is Ripley in Aliens, etc., the Alien movies. A great example of a female navigating eight.
We've actually talked about a number of navigating eights on this podcast. So if people want to, we have an episode that's partially about Alien and Aliens, as well as about Captain Jack Aubrey, another navigating eight, and Master and Commander, the Russell Crowe character. We've got an episode talking about Jackie Brown in Jackie Brown, very much a navigating eight. Emily Benetto, played by Aubrey Plaza in Emily the Criminal, and Imperator Furiosa in Mad Max Fury Road and in the Furiosa prequel.
Right. And I'm not sure if we talked about this one yet, but I think at some point we thought that Maximus from Gladiator was probably a navigating eight.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
I also think Roy Kent in Ted Lasso.
Oh, mm-hmm.
And Melissa Chimente in Abbott Elementary, the redheaded teacher.
Oh, right. Yeah, interesting. Yeah. I'd have to go back and definitely an 8. I wonder if transmitting at sometimes, although there's a lot of navigating stuff there. I think she's probably a South Philly Irish. No, is she an Italian character? I can't remember. Oh, yeah. Well, in South Philly, being from Philadelphia, in South Philly, the heavy components are either Irish or Italian. And, but she's definitely what we would call here a South Philly chick for sure. So very, very eight-ish.
Played up.
So yeah, I can see the navigating. Yeah.
And then a movie that people don't really reference anymore, but was big in its day for a minute, was Colors, a movie directed by Dennis Hopper about two cops in the kind of gang-riddled parts of L.A. And Robert Duvall's character in that is very much a navigating eight, contrasted quite sharply with Sean Penn's transmitting eight character.
Yeah. That's a good one. And I think in real life, Sean Penn might be a navigating eight. He strikes me that way, and I think he's played that in a number of movies, but I would agree with you in that one. He's a transmitting eight. And that interesting juxtaposition, and we've talked about Heat before. In Heat, we have De Niro as a preserving eight character and Pacino as a transmitting eight character. That's a really interesting interplay, right? You can watch those two characters, and De Niro is all self-controlled fury and, methodical, activity, whereas Pacino's character is just all, expression. Right? So.
And we got an episode about that too.
Yes, that's right. We do. We do. All right, good. All right, TJ, I think that brings us to a close. Any final thoughts before we wrap up?
I recommend this movie with no reservations whatsoever.
Yeah, I completely agree. And again, I'll go back and say, although Godfather will always be my favorite movie, Godfather II is a better movie, man. I hate to say it, but it's one. It is just a hell of a cinematic accomplishment. So go watch it, appreciate it, and enjoy.
Whether you want to learn about eights or not, it's just worth watching.
That's right. All right, everybody. Thanks for listening. We'll be coming back soon with a podcast on the Preserving Eight. We've talked a bit about the Preserving Eight this time, but we're going to go deeper into that with another episode of the Enneagram in a Movie podcast.